Right, so safety, number one rule is anything paint or chemical related, you want to be wearing a good quality mask. You also want some gloves for your precious hands, and additionally with the activator you possibly want some goggles. Just basically you need to keep yourself protected and wear some old clothes. Unless you've liked, shared and subscribed our video, then you may have been picked for one of our merchandise t-shirts which you could be wearing to protect the rest of you. So that's the safety out of the way. Let's go on to the tools and bits for applying the paint. Tools for applying the paint. We have number one, paintbrush. Now, I don't need to show most people how to use a paintbrush, but you put it in your paint and you paint on. Now, the one tip I can say when using our paint is what you want to do is make sure there's no paintbrush marks left, because there's nothing authentic about rust that has paintbrush marks in. So you can do that by just quickly dusting it off to get rid of the paintbrush marks, or incorporating some stipples into the paint by using your paintbrush like so. So that's one way of doing it. We use a paintbrush all the time for kind of awkward to get areas. And there's nothing wrong with using a paintbrush, but the slightly better option is paint roller, which is what this is. So a very cheap tray and a paint roller. Now we advise to use solvent safe paint roller heads. Now the reason being is if you just buy cheap roller heads, then they break up after 10-15 minutes, and there's nothing worse than you're painting like this and then finding bits of this stuck to your paint. The reason being is the solvents in our paint will remove the glue that's in a non-solvent safe roller head, and it will leave horrible bits over whatever you're painting. So although this is a cheap setup, just invest a couple of more pounds into solvent safe roller heads. This is our go-to method for applying paint. It's a very good method, it's a very quick method, and it uses the minimum amount of paint possible because you can get it on nice and even, thin. You've also not got to worry about brush marks, but we normally use kind of the two together, mainly because we can't get a roller into some areas. So those are those, and then I say a more professional setup, but it's not necessarily, but some people may always choose to go to a gun. Now, I always advise not to buy a good quality gun, simply because they're a pain to clean out. Additionally to that, you're not going to want all the kind of metals going through a real expensive gun over and over again, because you're going to have to kind of repair your gun after a while. So just these cheap ones kind of on eBay, Amazon, there's loads of places you can buy them. I think it was about £10 for this. I kind of use it as a use and throw, simply because I don't really spray that often. If I did, I could just use it, clean it out and chuck it to one side and keep reusing it. Scrap men will kind of squash that down, we recycle it through that way of giving it to the local scrap man that comes, just goes into our metal bin. But yeah, that's kind of that. A 1.4mm nib or pin or whatever you want to call it, needle, that's kind of good enough for it. You do not at any point thin the paint down. If you do, that can cause issues. So we are looking at making the product to thin the paint down. It doesn't cause issues, but any kind of commercial 2K thinner that we've used, or 1K thinner at the minute, has all caused issues. So we're going to try and work on a specific one for our paint. Hopefully that'll be something down the line. But you don't need to thin it. What you need to do is up the pressure on your compressor slightly higher than what you would do spraying a normal paint, and then just keep the paint agitated. So you'll spray a bit like you would normally, and then just give it a shake, spray a bit more, shake. Just like a metal flake, if you use a metal flake or a metallic, you would like to keep the cop agitated. Another tip is if it ever clogs, which is rare, but sometimes if you've not mixed it properly, you could have a clog. Another tip, most sprayers will know this, but if you don't, it's just a quick tip. Obviously you'll be wearing gloves, masking, etc. Put your thumb over the end and just give it a quick spray, and what will happen with that is any blockage that's potentially in there will just knock it back up and you can carry on spraying. One other thing to note is none of these cheap ones come with it, but if for some mad reason you want to use an expensive one, you'll find that some of them have like a pre-filter that's in here. It'll be like a little plastic thing with mesh on. You need to remove that because there's no way the paint's going through that. So you can use these. I have used these, but kind of the downside with the spray gun is you don't need a gun finish. and also there's a lot more masking, there's a lot more prep work. You've got to mask everything because spray just goes everywhere. With a roller, you've only really got to mask a bit of glass off and anything else, a little bit on the floor, and just go like crazy. You're not going to get paint kind of the other side of your workshop. So we kind of much prefer these over. I'm going to show you how to do a van at home. We've got a VW or Volkswagen Caddy. I'm not spraying it. The spray gun is going. I'm not bothering spraying it. I'm going to do it with these tools right here. Additionally, another tip that's on our Facebook group that one of the customers just told us recently is a good way of applying the paint is by sponge. Now, I haven't got a sponge here, but if you can imagine that this is basically a sponge, what they do is if they want an authentic bit of rust on this panel here, so say if this top bit was the colour and they wanted a bit of rust, just a small area, they would use a sponge just to dab where they want the rust. I'm going to do a quick video on that to show how to do that effect, but it is another way of applying the paint, so that's probably another option for you as well. Right, so the other tools that people will want is nearer the end of the paint process. So we've explained the tools to apply, we've explained what's in the kits. We'll explain how to apply it in another video. We're just going to go through a couple of other bits that you're going to want. You're going to want something like this, a panel degreaser. For whatever reason, we've had a customer that's gone crazy and used stuff like acetone, and you don't want anything real harsh. Paint shops will have panel degreaser in, or brake cleaner. If you haven't got any of those, hot soapy water, which will be, there's obviously other kind of products, but like Fairy Liquid, a dash of that with some hot water will be enough to clean. So something for cleaning whatever you're doing. Right, so you've got your tools sorted, you know how you're applying the paint. The only other tools you'll need is a bit of sandpaper, and that is ideally for removing kind of any brush marks you may have left or any high spots in the paint that you're not kind of happy with. So we normally use like a 120 grit, but the most important thing that you can buy is these green Scotch pads. Now they're brilliant for getting into kind of all kind of awkward nooks and crannies you may need to get a Scotch pad into. They're also the only thing you need to activate the paint with. So once you've kind of followed the instructions and you've activated the bottle, you've got your mixture ready to go on. You don't even need to sand our paint, it's that easy to activate. You just wear your gloves, obviously, rip a bit of Scotch pad off, soak it so it's soaked through, and scrub as hard as you can. Obviously imagine this is painting rusty paint. You're scrubbing, and just basically scrub it all over. And keep applying more, keep it wet, basically so the whole panel's done. And you can leave that dry, you'll see it basically rusting pretty much before your eyes within like 5-10 minutes. And then once you've done that, you can then just dust more activator over the top and you get all your nice runs and everything in. So yeah, simply for just activating, you can get away with Scotch pads on their own as long as they're soaked and you're wearing gloves because you need to protect your hands and potentially goggles as well. So that's kind of the one thing you do need. Sandpaper's optional. We do explain a long sanding process on the can labels. They will be changed in the future. This is basically because the product mix was a bit harder to sand, but we've been running around since 2014 and obviously the product's developed really well since then. We're always doing research and development, and we've got to a stage where it's just easy and quick to do it by this. You can follow the can instructions, it's just a lot of sanding, but they also make it very safe so people don't sand through high spots. And what I mean by that is if I was just to put on the can label, just use 120 grit sandpaper and scrub hard, you might get people that are scrubbing like this and not realising that the high spot is going to sand through a lot quicker than the low spot. And I don't want people messing their kind of cars up and stuff or whatever they're painting. So we do a very long process which is using higher grade sandpaper, just kind of make that as user friendly as possible. But realistically, you don't need to do it that way. You only need green Scotch pads, a pair of gloves and soak your Scotch in activator. And then if you do need to resort to sandpaper, we normally use something like a 120 just to remove any high spots or any kind of marks left by a brush if you didn't get them out at the time. So dead simple, you don't need a massive amount of stuff. The only other thing I did fail to mention is you're going to need masking tape to mask any areas. Use a good quality tape. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you're going to need that with any paint job anyway. We do a cool in-house service of making paint stencils. Now the way these work, they'll be shipped with a kind of a cover over the top as well. And the way they work is once you've got your paint job how you're happy with, and if you're anything like me, you can't sign right, which is like a cool small paintbrush. It's a skill on its own, not many people can do it. This is a quick hack. Now, we'll design a stencil or you supply the stencil to cut. We much prefer you to supply the stencil, and especially if they're cool, funny or offensive ones, they're always the best because they're funny to look at. But you do it, we'll cut it out for you. Or like I say, we can design one with your own text on. And you'll receive it. It's basically a case of peeling it off and you can apply it. It will lightly stick to whatever surface you're applying it to. And then you can use an aerosol can, you can use paint, dab it on, you can use a brush, dab it on, a roller, whatever you kind of apply your paint with. And then once it's tacked, flashed off, you can peel off the kind of stencil, and it will leave you with anywhere that's got a hole in will have paint on your surface, and you'll have no stencil left. It will be peeled off. So it'll give you a cool, I mean this wasn't done with my stencil, but you'll be able to see the design. It'll be something similar to that. That was hand painted, but you'll have a cool painted kind of logo on the side of your vehicle, or whatever you're doing, whether that be a shop sign or whatever. So yeah, these are a cool touch, not very expensive, and they're also available by the website. I'll pop all the links for everything below. But yeah, any questions, drop us a message below. We're going to show you how to paint next.